find peace as in the ceremonies of your fathers, the former kings who were before you. So they shall burn incense for you and lament for you, saying, At last, Lord, for I have pronounced the word, says the Lord. So again, some great king would die. They may bury him or put around him all these different kind of ointments and things like that, and various spices, and burn his incense. What do we do today? We send flowers to somebody's funeral. We've all been to funerals where it was maybe just a small amount was there of flowers, or it may have been the house was full. So again, here they would prepare the body with these special things, and yet today we send flowers. Next we have King Jehoram. He's a king that died, and no one attended his funeral. 2 Chronicles 21:18. After all this, the Lord struck him in his intestines with an incurable disease. Then it happened in the course of time, after the end of 2 years, that his intestines came out because of his sickness. So he died in severe pain. And all his people made no burning for him, like the burning for his fathers. He was 32 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 8 years, and to no one's sorrow departed. However, they buried him in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. He was not a good king. And he died a pretty terrible death for 2 years. Some kind of intestinal problem that came about. But nobody cared. Nobody sorrowed over this. And that's sad that of all his sons and daughters, they didn't care enough about him. He was a bad king. He married Ahab and Jezebel's daughter. That's who he married. He had all his brothers and sisters killed because he was afraid they would come in and try to take over the kingship. One son survived all this, but nobody cared enough to attend his funeral. I took part in a funeral once. I had to say a few words, and there were a few. Besides the folks there at the funeral home, one person was there. And the person wasn't even a family member. One person. It happens. Sometimes a person outlives their friends, maybe even outlives their family. But that was a sad event for that to happen. I remember the words of Yogi Berra, the Yankee guy, baseball guy. He said, if you don't attend the funeral of your friends, they won't attend yours. So we got to go. In Acts 9, verse 36, we find where Tabitha or Dorcas died. And this is a possible viewing, the first viewing. During the biblical times, they often would bury the deceased that very day. If it was too late in the day, it would be the next day. But had enough time, they would bury the deceased. And if you notice in verse 37, but it happened in those days that she became sick and died. And when they washed her, they laid her in the upper room. Possible view. She had a lot of friends there. And they were all sad because of her death. So she was washed and put in the upper room. During the biblical times, at least under the Jewish laws, this would be their own personal laws. When it comes to the washing, only a woman could wash a woman. A man could not wash a woman and prepare her for the burial. Women could wash men and women, but women could only wash the women. So here we find she became sick and died, and they had washed her That would be the women that were there that took care of her and made preparation for the viewing and for her burial eventually. Of course, we know she was raised from the dead. In John 19, 39 and 40, this is when Christ died and Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea went to remove his body from the cross. And Nicodemus, who at first came to Jesus by night, also came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. Now, that's a lot. 100 pounds of these spices and things put around the body. And they took the body of Jesus and bound it in strips of linen with the spices that the custom of the Jews is to bury. So these strips would be placed out, the body would be placed on them, and then as they would fold the strips over the body, and they would put the spices in it, put another layer over that. Again, here's how they went about preparing the body of Jesus for burial. Now in John 20, on the resurrection morning, we find something interesting. In verse 4, so they both ran, this is Peter and John, they both ran together, and another disciple outran Peter and came to the tomb first. And he, stooping down, looking in, saw the linen clothes lying there, yet he did not go in. And Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen clothes lying there. The Greek is showing here, bringing this out when Peter and John got there. They looked in and they didn't just look. Okay, he's not here to leave. They were taking everything in, like an investigator would. You go to a murder scene and he's looking, taking pictures, writing this down. That's what Peter, especially Peter, he goes into the tomb. But what he sees there, the linen clothes, meaning that they have what they had wrapped Jesus in, it was as if his body had just evaporated from those linen clothes. And it just eased down. Now they were saying, want people to believe that somebody had stolen the body. If that be the case, why would they not just take body and wrappings and all and leave with it? But the linens were there. And why would somebody unwrap the body, take the body, and then try to put the linens back together as if nothing had been moved? You can't do that. That's just more proof that the Bible gives us that Jesus came out of that tomb. He came out. And there we find the linens there had not been touched. And that's what Peter, and especially Peter and John, that's what they're looking at, taking it all in. In Mark 5, we find the Jairus' daughter. She died, a young lady, I think she was 12. And there were those we see here in verse 38. And he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult, and those who wept and wailed loudly. These would be the professional mourners that they had to come. You would hire them, and there was a certain amount of days that they would stay at your house, even after the burial. Remember, you probably buried that day, and they could stay up to 40 days in some cases, around your house in the morning. And you would have to, they would sort of be there to take care of it. If you had a need, they would be there to take care of it. And that's probably what was happening right here. They had professional mourners, and even for the poorest of individuals. The Jewish law said that even the poorest person was to have 2 flute players and 1 woman there to wail. 2 flute players and a woman there to cry and grieve for it. So it may be right here, as everything is going on, there may be all kind of flutes or other instruments being played, you may have a large number of individuals that are crying and carrying on as they would, but they're hired to do it. It's not that it really touches them anyway, they're just hired to do it. In Luke 7, verse 12, this is the Widow of Maine, the Widow of Maine. At the last sentence, a large crowd from the city was with her, very possibly with some of these mourners, professional mourners that were there. In John 11, 19 and 20, this is at the death of Lazarus. Jesus gets there, we know 4 days after he's dead. And verse 20 is interesting. It says, then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary was sitting in the house. She's there. She runs out to meet Christ. Possible, in verse 19, there were people there comforting her as well, her and Mary. And then 11:31, then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, she is going to the tomb to weep there. So Mary's going to see Jesus. And their thinking is, she's going to the tomb. Why would they think that? If somebody close to you died, the Jewish law was for 7 days, the only place you could go was to the tomb. You couldn't go grocery shopping, you couldn't go visit this family member, that family member. For 7 days, if you left that house, you had to go to the tomb to weep. And that's why they're saying it. It's not because they think, well, she's just going there. That's what was expected, where she would go. And they had other customs that after 7 days, you could get out more, but you still couldn't go to work until after 30. Then we have our last verse, Ecclesiastes 7:2. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. As we started our lesson, how individuals no longer really want a big funeral. Let's try to do away with them, and we just have a graveside, or maybe we'll have some kind of gathering at some future point. Sometimes it doesn't happen. I think we're missing something here. We learn a whole lot more about life, the shortness of life, eternity, at a funeral home than we do at a place where we eat. A lot more about that. I think that's where Solomon's trying to come across here. So I've been a part of funerals that were very comforting to the family. I've been a part of funerals where there's a lot of hatred and tension there. Sad it's that way, but sometimes it happens. I know I'm in contact with a fellow that his mother is going to be dying at some point, and he wants me to do his service. Him and his brother don't get along, and him and his aunt don't get along. And he has said to me, now when my mother dies, I want you to lambast them and tell them they have treated me terribly. Little does he know, I'm not going to do that. He's in for a surprise when that time comes. I'm not going to make things worse. He's mad at them that they stole this and stole that from the mom's house, and here we go. He's told me all about it. But we can learn a lot from funerals. Just thinking about our own eternity one day as well. All right, a little different, but the Bible has something to say about it. Let's conclude here. Time for the bell.